Dun 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 doo. Captain Farty. Do, 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 do.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take off as your reality is adjusted.
Good morning, global gulag. Yes, digital gulag. I'm going to come back to that later. And I'm multitasking terribly. I haven't even got my YouTube page opened up. Good morning, global gulag. Yeah, it certainly sounds like the audio's going all right there. And image looks all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back once again. Hello to all you good people in the chat room. Find the right page again, so I'm looking at the right tab. Okay, there we go. Right, yes, welcome back once again. Another edition of Sol Excalibre on this Moon Day evening. Welcome, ladies and chest feeders. I see you, some people in the chat room already. Hello, Taz. Yeah, join in whenever you're ready, Taz. Dan Conzio, hello, mate. Welcome back again. And Roscoe Pico Train, hello. And Lopsam Tatro, hello, hello. Simon Boyle, hello. And Just Space Goat Farts, hello. This evening, Lowlands Peter's got his fart bubble on while he's typing away on the keyboards. Yeah.
I'm working from home.
Just like everybody else in the world now. We all work from home. Faye Ferrer, hello. And Oshamo69, hello. I'm not sure if you mean like the O's, because often in like text speak, internet speak now, you put little symbols or a letter at either end of the word you actually intend for it. So is it supposed to be Sham69, like the band, or is it Oshamo69? I don't know. But, I tried to read the names out as if, I'm getting the meaning that you intend with the name, the way people write it. Rizzy Tuba, hello, thanks for joining in. And So South, hello, hello. Lynn Anderson, hello. Hope you got the cakes going again already. Nice cup of tea and a slice of cake. And Dinny Carr, hello. Lowlands Pete's in the room. Donna Caddy, hello, hello. And Made in UK PLC, hello, mate. Welcome back again. And I'll try, like I always do, I'll try to come back to the chat. Sonia White, hello. I will try and keep an eye on the chat and come back as we go along. But if you've been listening before, you know what I'm like. I tend to get carried away when I'm waffling and ranting, and I don't always remember to come back and check in the chat room. Mr. Wild Brew, hello. Definitely a good time to start getting into home brewing again. That craze that sort of seemed to take off in the 80s. I remember my dad doing a few of that. He had several demijohns in the cupboard, and as a younger person, I wasn't allowed to sample any of it. But yeah, definitely home brewing is something to look at in these days, in these times. Sidefish, hello. And Patrick Nee, hello, hello. Thanks for joining in. This evening, it's been a busy weekend, hasn't it? You may have noticed there's been a lot of stuff sort of kicking off over this weekend, last week that's been going through. And we have now the Ides of March. Yes, it is the 15th, so we're in the Ides of March right about now. And lo and behold, there's all this craziness kicking off, yet more craziness on top of craziness. It's the way craziness goes sometimes. Craziness generates craziness. Chaos generates chaos. Sorry, I was just multitasking, trying to get me notes open. Krishna, hello. Thanks for joining in the chat room. Yeah, there's been a lot of crazy stuff over these last few days. And some of it seems to be a deliberate attempt to converge certain narratives and agendas. You know, we've spoken about this a few times recently in reference to the green agenda, the global climate change, the anthropogenic climate bullshit that they've been trying to sell the public for several years, a couple of decades, really, more than that. If you go back to the 70s when they wrote their original documents, or it would have been 60s, wouldn't it? So from the Club of Rome and the 300 and all that lot, and they started trying to put together their ideas in their think tanks about, well, how can we influence the public to do all this stuff that we want them to do? We'll blame them for the climate change, and we'll tell them if they don't follow this agenda that we're showing to them, then the whole planet will be consumed with all our poop. So it'll all be your fault, and you'll have to pay taxes to have it cleaned up constantly. And so when they clean it up, where do they take it? Are they just moving poop from one place on the planet to somewhere else on the planet and saying, oh, look, we've cleaned it up? You have to pay us for the cleanup job. Yeah, anyway, the green agenda, the climate agenda, has been connected to the COVID bullshit, the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus, throw out all the keywords for the algorithm so they can stick a little label under this YouTube stream. Yeah, and they can push it down and submerge it with the algorithm and try and hide it, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, cul-de-sacking, that's what that's called. So the climate agenda, they've already in previous weeks and months been slowly knitting those two narratives together so that they can present to the public this concept that we need to carry on with lockdowns because it's good for the planet. Yeah, lockdowns deal with the climate problems that we've been raising for the last however long, but you'll still have to pay carbon tax, and you'll still have to go to family planning clinics. So the Billy Bob Gates agenda to reduce the amount of children that are being born into the world, you still got to go through all that, even though we'll say that the lockdown are helping against the green agenda. But now they seem to be creating a new process of weaving together narratives. Those narratives being the intersectional divides and intersectional theory that they've been promoting for the last decade plus, maybe longer. Again, some of these threads go back many decades. But that intersectional division, they have in recent weeks, certainly, and I think we have mentioned this once or twice, either on the Monday show or on Pete's show on Wednesday night on Reality Chat, they have been suggesting all along for several months now that the Black and Asian and Middle Eastern, the BAME, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern, that new demographic that they like to use, that kind of catch-all label to genetically isolate certain groupings on the planet, BAME, that grouping, that demographic is one, the most likely to be vaccine hesitant. They're more likely to not want the vaccine, and two, they're the ones that are more subjected to the oppression of the white patriarchy. Therefore, they're more deserving, and we should be vaccinating them first. And if you say no, you're a racist. So they've been attaching that race, ethnic difference to the COVID narrative for the past several weeks, certainly, if not longer. Now we're on to the gender intersectional divide. So in the last week, we've had a story literally fill the UK media. It's dominated the UK media about a woman named Sarah Everard who died at the beginning of March in a really weird, coincidental, I'm saying that word a bit, mysteriously, to make the point, to try and get the point across that it's not a coincidence. Coincidentally, being sarcastic about it, it happened, she died on the 3rd of March, so it was the 3rd of the 3rd, and she was 33 years old when she died. And there's other 33s that are connected into this narrative. I'll give you a link in a sec to someone who's done a good article to cover a lot of this interesting connectivity. You know, there's a lot of these weird connections in this storyline, in this narrative. And the story has literally dominated the UK press for the past several days now. Everybody's got to talk about Sarah Everard. Yeah, look at YouTube, and the news section of YouTube is just all about that. If you're here in the UK, obviously we're showing you different, the algorithm will show you different stories if you're in a different country. But here in the UK, that's the story that's been promoted day after day for the last few days. And connected into that is Cressida Dick and demands for her to resign because of the police's heavy-handed reaction to the vigil that they tried to hold for Sarah over the weekend, and people getting arrested, and this ginger-haired woman who's now all over the news telling her story to every news channel about how she was so frightened when she was standing up there on the bandstand, and she just wanted, you know, to take part in the protest. But there's all these police gathering around her, and they were holding their batons. Yeah, was there meant to be an innuendo there? Or were the police, you know, making a statement about how we're aware that we're surrounded by a large crowd of people, but I've got my baton on hand, so if we need to beat our way out of the crowd, maybe that's what he intended with what he said, or maybe he didn't say it at all. Maybe she's just suggesting it to the public to reinforce that patriarchal gender difference of, I was being oppressed by somebody with a penis. Somebody with a penis and testicles was oppressing me while I was trying to stand in the bandstand and just be in a protest. Yeah, there's various other things. I am being deliberately sarcastic because the whole situation does not really bear a lot of scrutiny. It doesn't bear up to a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of curious anomalies and coincidences in the storyline and in the way it's being presented to the public. As I say, it's been saturating the UK media for the last few days. I'll just get this link for the one article. This is on enchantedlifepath.com, and there's a few videos linked in there as well if people want to check out his stuff. Check out his website. But he's done a good article there where he's listing a lot of those questions and curiosities. For example, as I say, he's pointing out the same thing. March the 3rd, the 3rd of the 3rd. Yeah, so obvious 33 in there. But March the 3rd is the 62nd day of the year with 303 days remaining. So in other words, another 33. Yeah. Yeah. And that's just the little bits about Sarah Everard herself. Then there are questions about, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and I haven't got an article to show for this, but just questions about the policeman himself. He worked for some special assignment groups, let's put it that way. So when I was chatting with some of the guys last week off air, we was just chatting about all this stuff in general. And I made the suggestion or the speculation. It's like, well, maybe he was connected into something that meant they wanted to get rid of him in some fashion or push him out, or he could be used as a sacrificial patsy. Patsy? Oh, I wonder where Patsy Stevens. Oh, yeah, Patsy. They could use him as a sacrificial patsy to enable them to create this whole storyline. And this storyline gives them then a focusing narrative to redirect the public's angst from the reality that you have now spent an entire year in lockdown, even though the government constantly keep telling you that, just a little bit more, just a bit further, just a bit further. Daddy, how many years does 2 weeks last? Just a bit further, just a bit further. The whole year you've now been in lockdown, and they know the public is getting extremely frustrated. They call it lockdown fatigue. as if it's just something, it's just meaningless. You're just fatigued from being locked down. It's like, no, mate, people are dying. People are losing their welfare, their businesses, their homes. It is destroying family. It is tearing people apart. It is condemning elderly to die alone without being able to see their loved ones before they die. No, it's not just lockdown fatigue. Disgusting. But they know the public has a lot of pent-up angst and frustration at the moment. So isn't it convenient timing that here comes along this story that hits so many emotional buttons and allows a lot of people, certainly a good, nearly half the population, that demographic that are all female, now have this opportunity to vent some of their pent-up frustration and anger that they've been stuck in this situation for a year plus. It's all the fault of the men. It's all the fault of those penises, the patriarchy, which is why in the subtitle tonight it says viral patriarchy, because I do think what they're doing is attempting to stitch together the two narratives, to attach that intersectional theory, the divisionary theory, that it's men versus women, that we're separate, that, we should be living separately as individuals completely separate without any need to procreate or marry or have families or any of that old stuff that we used to do. No, that's not allowed anymore. Now you've all got to be your own individuals in your little cubicle. If you want to procreate, you'll have to ask for permission and get a license and pay the fee, and then send your sperm off in a test tube to some lab somewhere, and they'll send you a message saying you successfully had a child, but you can never see it or visit it because it's got to live separately as well in its own little cubicle. I'm digressing a lot just to stress a point, to use an extreme example to stress a point. They're weaving together those two narratives of, we got to do all this because COVID. In other countries, they have introduced a curfew based on the justification of COVID alone. So in France, curfew at 6 p.m. Thanks to Taz, she's been sharing links and information about the situation in France. Curfew 6 p.m. For Gary, Society of the Spectacle over in Spain, similar but not exactly the same timing. The curfew there was 9 p.m. for them. But same kind of thing, curfew, because why? COVID. The virus only comes out after that time, so you have to go home and lock yourself up because otherwise the virus will get you when it's stalking in the streets. Now, in this country, maybe, and I am just speculating here, maybe they think they can't get away with introducing a curfew directly in that fashion because the public here might not put up with it. Please remember, please keep in mind that they are constantly monitoring and analysing the public's response based on people's social media posts, the recorded conversations, because all your smart devices are listening to everything you're saying to each other, So they're monitoring what's the public's reaction at the moment. Do we think we could get away with pushing this particular policy or agenda, or would they react too strongly to this suggestion? They're monitoring that, and I wonder whether they feel they can't get away with introducing a curfew here because of the reaction. So instead, they're trying to bring the curfew in from a different angle. Because
the curfew in the Netherlands was supposed to last for 2 weeks. It's 10 weeks now. So.
Yeah, how many years does 2 weeks last, mate? What time is the curfew?
9 o'clock.
9 p.m.
But you can go out with a dog, but it has to be on a leash, because if the dog is unleashed, the virus will attack you. That's serious.
Oh, the dog running around off the leash obviously stirs up the viral particles.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. Dog farts, I think. Yeah.
I'm trying to comprehend the science because we got to trust the science. Yeah. Welcome tonight. Is going to be very much a sarcasm night, I'm afraid, because all this stuff is becoming so crazy. I feel
it's real. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How else do you describe watching the comings and goings within the ward in the local asylum. You know, I feel sometimes like I'm sat in that ward in the corner of the room watching all the crazy people just going backwards and forwards. You know, this
mental,
week,
isn't it? Absolutely
Yeah.
mental, Cookie. I mean, the amount of red flags I'm seeing on that story about the woman's murder and stuff, and the way that the crowd were reacting in Clapham Common, where this woman reads out something and they all repeat it. It's repeat, repeat, repeat. They're seeing that going. That's a big red flag for me, because that's like, well, what you're doing there. Everyone should be in a Delphi exactly. Seen that before, being worked with a crowd, and you're there to think for yourself. We always say that, think for yourself. So you're just repeating something that someone's pre-written out. You don't even know what it is, but you get into the mantra of this, which we've seen happen, haven't we? We've actually witnessed it. And it's amazing how many of them actually jump on board and start just repeating everything that this person's written down before. It's like, what? I don't look. I think that, there's something going on with this. It's like the baby P thing. You remember Baby P and all that back in the day? They make a big deal out of this, and like you say, the background's really dodgy with her boyfriend, or if it was a boyfriend, or and then there was another case of a policeman murdering his lover a few months ago in the UK. He got, I think, 25 years in jail because she was going to spill the beans on him, and he murdered her, just killed her. But there wasn't that, but this one's, they've put the spotlight on it, and they want to, like I say, push many agendas forward here. So and the policing thing's interesting, because again, we mentioned the police and the abuse of power and all the rest of it over the whole of this thing. But I always think protest isn't the way. I watched an interesting video today about stand alone, just stand in the park or whatever, and you're just doing your thing, and it's not this like carrying banners and saying it's a protest. We don't need permission to do what we want to do. If it's not causing any harm or loss or whatever like that, we just will do it. And I think people are getting onto that idea now a bit more, and seeing, okay, this, how do we, what are the police going to do if everybody just displays it? What are they going to do? They just can't. It's just out, and you're doing your thing, and you're not walking down the streets with banners and all that stuff. So the police, then it's like a magnet to the police, isn't it? Then they have to, all right, there's all. But if everybody just went out, stood around, went to areas they were comfortable standing around in for a bit, and en masse do it, it's just a completely different thing. They can't do anything about that.
I definitely agree. I'm just thinking, I said before we started, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last Wednesday, but over the course of the early part of last week, before this sort of Sarah Everard story took over most of the media, on the internet media, certainly anyway, I don't know whether this was shown on the TV news kind of stuff, but there was a lot more videos of the police being in large number presence in public parks, parkland, because I think what they'd seen happening is, after Bojo's announcement about beginning the step process of letting us all back out again, allowing us to go and sit in the park and chat with someone, a lot of people obviously took that as being, oh, it's okay to go to the park now again. So a lot of people were going to the parks and gathering, in numbers. So the police turned up in large numbers. And a lot of the videos you could find covering this the other week, this is only like a week plus ago, several days ago, you'd see like 10 people stood around in the park or sat on the grass or something like that, and there'd be 20 police. Yeah. And there'd be, I think we did during the coverage of that woman that got severely manhandled, that was at Speaker's Corner, wasn't it? But the point was, there was an overt presence of police, and they act in a very heavy-handed fashion. This is a public display of force, a public display of power, in the same way as a gang. I've described it this way before. In the same way as a gang leader would beat up one of his own members, gang members, in front of all the other gang members to make the point of who's in charge. They're making a really public display of like, yes, we are the police, and yes, we will beat you down if we're told to, and you will not be allowed to protest, because this is all that problem, reaction, solution game of getting the public to focus on these organized protests, which are like you've often pointed this out. We've often talked about this. These protests are just riddled with operatives and influence from NGOs and whatever. Like you say, at that vigil, they was doing the repeat thing, the kind of Delphi technique, which is a classic indicator of NGO organisation, which means it's part of an agendized narrative.
Yeah.
And
do you know what also really surprises me? Well, it doesn't surprise me that how quickly the royal story's been buried until this has come on board. See how quickly they changed. There's just nothing about that now. Nothing from
it's like a double punch.
Just gone, disappear, bury it. Don't talk about that anymore. Move on to this woman who's been murdered. And focus all your energies onto that.
Last week it was all about
another ginger.
It's gingerism. Last week it was all about racism. This week it's all about gender. So it's like bam, bam, punch, punch. Here are your narratives to follow. Forget about COVID. Forget about the royals. No, just this: race, gender, intersectional theory promoted as what you should be caring enough to protest about. I just thought I better screen share this because I know I'll put the link in the side chat, but in case people are watching on a device where they can't see the chat or whatever, this was a story I was referencing on enchantedlifepath.com. The title: Patsy Stevenson, crisis actor, physics grad arrest at Sarah Everard vigil. And like I say, he's got a few links in there and information, so you can check that through and look into things for yourself and ask questions for yourself and think for yourself.
Don't repeat other people's shit over a megaphone, if you know what I mean. It's like, come on, people, start thinking for, that's what it's about. I know people are driven by the emotion of it all and they get sucked in. That's where they take advantage. It's like a hypnotist, isn't it? Being able to work out who can be hypnotized or not. Same technique, same stuff.
Like you mentioned about that other case. They're pushing this on the media as if it's something that almost never happens or has never happened before, such that you should all be shocked and outraged, and this should be the only thing that occupies your attention. Whereas this is something that has happened before, unfortunately not uncommon. I don't want to say often, but it's certainly not uncommon. And police have a track record of, some of them are bad, definitely bad, bad. Some of them are really bad. And some of them are connected into situations like I speculated about earlier. Was that guy connected into a network where he may have had access to information or knowledge about important people that he was tasked to protect? Therefore, they wanted to get rid of him. So they set him up as a patsy in this narrative. Yeah, there's loads of questions like that. And the whole thing just stinks of deliberate psyop and manipulation. And you mentioned Baby P as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that came to my mind when I first saw the story come up and I read the name Sarah Everard, and I thought, Sarah's Law. Sarah's Law. It's not exactly the same kind of thing because this is talking about people who are on the child sex offender list. And Sarah's Law is your right, supposedly, you've now been granted this right by this legislation, that you can ask the police if somebody, maybe you're suspicious of somebody who's in contact or working with children. So you can ask the police and they will look to see if their name is on the offenders list. But that is connected into this being a male violence, sexual assault narrative, and there's suggestions of men being put under curfew from 6 p.m. This is all about that divide, that Hegelian divide between the sexes, so that not only should you be, concerned about the difference genetically, ethnically between you and other people, you've got to be concerned about whether they've got a penis or not.
Isn't it interesting? We're going through this awakening. We are. I think we're going through a while. People are getting information, getting knowledge, waking up, being more aware. All that's going on right now. And it's funny, isn't it? How they always pull these things out the bag. Like you said, we've had racism. Now we've got, the battle with agendas and
The
whatever.
Ides of March.
You know, everything's going on at once. We're just being bombarded. And it's funny that, isn't it? So they want everybody to be, concerned with everything over here. Plus, they're going through awakening process, but they're hijacking it and sending you down that way. In that sense, because they've done that with these types of events before. We've seen it. That's why we're talking about it, because we've witnessed it, and we know what comes next.
I feel it. And this is a little bit esoteric, but hopefully people will get what I'm trying to say or trying to explain. There is a very purposeful connection between this time of the year, the solar year, and the feminine energy. Why is it at this time of the year we see this kind of stuff getting promoted or pushed? It's the Ides of March. Last week was Women's Day and Mother's Day, and we've had this situation occur. They're very focused to concentrate on the attempt to put a wedge between male and female. And part of what they're doing in an esoteric, magic, occultic kind of sense, they are appropriating the feminine energy during the time of conception in March.
And what
March
is it on Saturday? The weekend? It's the equinox. We're moving up to that. So sorry.
This time period, we mentioned this a little bit over the last few weeks. This time period, the beginning of spring, is when life comes back after winter. The flowers begin to sprout and bulb and whatever, and the animals begin to be breeding. They begin the conception process. They're not necessarily birthing yet, but this is the time period when new things are conceived. So why is it they're creating a new storyline during this time period? Do you get what I'm trying to point at? They're taking feminine energy during the time of inception, insemination, conception, etc. This time period of the solar year is all about that spark moment when life is conceived. Something is given life. So they're taking that feminine energy that's powerful at the moment, and they're trying to push it in a certain direction and mold it in a certain shape. The feminine energy is all this new modern theoretical concept like intersectional theory, where what gives women power, women power is not having men around full stop. The deadly virus of the patriarchy. They have this, or they are given this completely fucked up concept. And I've pointed this out before about the whole gay agenda. I'm not anti-homosexual in any way at all. People do what they do. They choose to do what they do, etc., etc. I'm not against people being gay or homosexual. That's their choice. But there's a difference between that and the way it's promoted and pushed on to especially the younger generations, to give them this idea that they actually want it, that it's desirable. So then that's not truly somebody finding themselves and coming out in that kind of realization of, actually, no, I fancy the same sex. This has been put into them as a suggestion. It's been germinated into them such that they're misdirected, and half the time later in life they change their mind, or they even, at the worst case scenarios, they take their own life because they can't deal with what they've done to themselves. Anyway, that's slight digression, but hopefully you get the point. They're taking that genuine female power. It's not the only female power, but it's one of the most obviously important ones. That genuine female power, the ability to conceive, to hold and germinate a life within themselves and bring a new life into the world. They're taking that and convincing, or trying to convince, women that their real power is not that at all. Their real power is their ability to be independent of men and not require men. How can you not require men but still have a future of the existence of people? There's only one way you could even conceive of that being possible, and that's the use of technology to perform the process of procreation and gestation, etc. This is founded on that concept of transhumanism. But what I mainly wanted to try and point out is this time period seems to be a time when they like to create new narratives. So I find it, it's another one for me of the little sort of warning signals that says this story is not genuine, not totally anyway. Maybe the woman was real and maybe she did actually die, but the story has been crafted in so many ways that it's not genuine. They're creating this deliberately for a propaganda purpose. And part of that purpose is to appropriate the feminine energy and separate it from the male energy, so that you no longer have that unity that is a power threat to the state. Yeah, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I always find it just, like I say, it's there in front of people that can see this, and it's just, so I wrote down, sorry to change it, before I forget, the Charlie Hebdo cartoon. Did anyone see that? Of the Queen kneeling on Meghan's neck. Yeah, it was caused outrage. Yeah, as they do. But yeah, just the whole thing. I mean, like I say, seen that unfold over the weekend, and even now today, there's stuff going on up there in London and that. And I didn't see all of it, but there seemed to be a lot of, like I say, a lot of those red flags being waved around, or what I saw of the footage. So people just beware of these things. I mean, like I say, they are again taking advantage of the fact we have been all locked in as well, and there are people just going out to these things because there's somewhere to go where you're not going to get too much hassle, and there's a bigger gathering and things. But yeah, they'll just they'll play this as they play it, and I think we'll just see how we are. I mean, people are, like I say, that it's interesting that they put these agendas out there as this rising of knowledge, information awakening, whatever you want to call it, is happening. And they'll do their damnedest. They're just like, they're desperate, like the word with flat earth and things like that. They're desperate. It really seems to be. But anyway, sorry, Pete, you want to say something?
Well, we had a similar thing happen yesterday where a guy was attacked by the police and a police dog and all that. And there was a whole group of press around him making pictures and all that. But the press never ever invited the victim or the guy to tell his side of the story, like what's happening with the redhead. Right? Yeah. So that's a bit a glaring, obvious clue that something is going on, that they want her. They are not going to bring somebody on that's going to say something unpredictable, something weird, something that doesn't fit the narrative or whatever. So it's a scam.
And somebody that maybe has some acting ability or background.
Yeah, she's an actress.
So that they can actually feed a line into the camera. So the point she says about the copper saying, "I've got my hand on my baton," she deliberately, purposely puts that line into the narrative because the interviewer didn't ask her. She just chooses to mention that, and it's like insert narrative point here. That requires, well, certainly, like you say, for them to feel confident that the person, the crisis actor or whatever they are, is going to be able to carry the narrative on without tripping up or being caught out. They prefer people who've got an acting background or some kind of ability like that, and there literally are companies out there that are acting agencies that host portfolios of people that are intended to do live trials, live action, like live action role play reenactments of emergency situations, commonly called crisis actors. And the mainstream media likes to try and debunk that. Classically, Snopes has tried to debunk it multiple times, but Snopes is just a fucking joke. Like when I was speaking with Jeff about it years ago, and I pointed out to him, have you ever thought about the fact that it says Nope S? Yeah, it's the word nope, but with two S's at either end. Snopes. So in other words, they're the agency that the governments go to whenever they want something debunked, because they will debunk it no matter what it is. You can claim that water is wet, and Snopes will try and debunk that. They're just a paid mouthpiece, basically.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of crap that they're constantly trying to pull on people.
And we're seeing it both everywhere. You know, see it in the US as well.
It's a
happening
jury
everywhere.
selection.
For the George
That's
Floyd.
another one of those interweaving of narratives and convenient timing at the moment. Yeah, they're choosing the jury for the George Floyd case, and we've got this Sarah Everard case over here. Funny that, isn't it?
And the bend the knee. I mean, that. Yeah. Anyway, that's. Don't get me started.
There's certainly the element there of, don't question the authority. In a similar fashion, it's sort of pointed out many times that the storyline of the Game of Thrones TV series that they did. They're constantly all these different houses and bloodlines fighting with each other, and they're always arguing, and nobody ever questions why they were thrown in the first place. They just fight over who gets to sit on the throne. This, in a similar fashion, is don't question why there's this authority in place or this claim to authority in the first place. No, just fight amongst yourselves over these reasons that we tell you.
People can see through that now. Let's
I want to change tack slightly, but it does connect in various ways, because some of what's happening around the Sarah Everard case and situation here in the UK at the moment is going to be used as a justification to introduce further legislation or to repeat further legislation. Like I think I mentioned earlier, you've got the Corona Act coming up for review, for debate.
That's right.
In a week or so. I think it's the 25th of March. They're going to be debating whether that's carried on again for another 6 months, which it will. Yeah, I'm pretty much guaranteed, 99.9% guaranteed. But currently, today, they've been debating the passport question. And I haven't had the chance to see any of that debate yet, but from what other people have said to me, that it looks okay at the moment, in the sense of enough, or a majority of the MPs are against introducing a domestic passport. But they seem, the majority seem to be on board for the idea that international travel will require some kind of vaccine passport to say you've had the COVID jab. Yeah, that's the situation at the moment in that sense. But this is connected in because it links in that ID requirement. Yeah, the principle that a lot of maybe not the only foundational point that this whole situation is about, but it's certainly one of the main foundational points that this whole situation has been about. Getting the public to accept the creation of a societal infrastructure where you have to walk around with a biometric digital ID of some kind. Yeah, and a lot of it has been geared around having some kind of electronic certificate in your smartphone, your smart device. But I want to play this advert from Amazon, and thanks to Venonymous, I'll put a link for his upload in the side chat. Let me just do that. Multitasking. I'll play the little video in a sec. Paste. There's the link in the chat for that. And I'll play this. I'll shut up and just play it, and you'll maybe sort of, get what I'm trying to say just by listening to this.
This is Zoe. Just like you, she uses lots of different cards and IDs to get through her day. What if all Zoe needed was herself? Introducing Amazon One, a free service that lets you use your palm to quickly pay for things, gain access, earn rewards, and more. Let's say you're grabbing your favorite coffee beverage, or heading into the office, or checking out. Just hover your palm and you're on your way. It's as easy as that. Sign up is free and takes less than a minute. All you need is a credit card, your phone number, and your palm. That's it. Since your palm is unique and can't be lost or misplaced, you can get things done quickly and securely. And with more experiences on the way, Amazon One will help you get even more done. simply by being you. Now, Zoe has more time to do what she loves, indoor skydiving. Enter, identify, and pay with Amazon One. This
Man.
I couldn't stop laughing at the last bit.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
She can do what she loves to do. Indoor skydiving. No outdoors. No actually going up in a plane and doing no. Indoors, inside an artificial environment, enclosed, not allowed out.
So just the palm is required, yeah.
This is one of the elements,
yeah, I can see this being
they've been working on
yeah.
palm ID because it scans the vein network in your hand, which is unique to every individual. No one person's veins are the same. It might happen eventually just through sheer scale of numbers that there'll be similarities, but it's much more distinct than a fingerprint even, right? So this is something they've been working on for a while because it requires near field sensing and all that kind of stuff. It's reading the vein pattern in your hand as well as the shape of your hand and all the other biometric identifiers. But yeah, you are the ID. And this point I've been stressing for a while now, that the silicon technology that they're persuading people to go along with, like the ID contained in your smart device, that silicon technology will fade out to biotech technology. So not too far away, it won't just be reading her ID of who she is. As part of that ID will be a check on her current vaccination status. So did she have a jab within the last month, and which particular brand of jab was it? All of that will be part of that kind of ID. So when they're showing about like going into work or going through the checkout, you could also include in that, I mean, they do show like a nightclub or a museum, just going into public spaces, you're going to have to do this scan, which will be connected to all that biometric data about you. This is the kind of shit. You don't need to have a smart device on you. You don't need to have any silicon technology with you. Your own genetics, your own biology, your own physiology. Remember that little quote from Anal Schwab? We will see the merger of people's identities, their physical, their biology, their virtual, blah, 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 in his fourth industrial revolution diatribe. This is what they're talking about. And this is already commercially viable and now starting to be offered and rolled out by Amazon as one of the companies. But obviously, the majority of them will all be on board because this is the new abnormal. This is the new digital gulag. What is it? What is the situation if she posts something online that is against the official narrative? What happens then when she's trying to?
They will cut her hand off and then use it as a. Well, literally cut your hand off. Yeah, they would cut everything off, wouldn't they? Everything's gone. They'll just shut you down. Yeah.
She'll walk up to the counter and the computer will go. Computer says no.
Your hand is bad.
What are you going to do now? Report to your local authority.
But if people
have
don't,
your ID checked or whatever,
See, they've softened everyone up with the chip and go, whatever it is, touch and go with your card on that little machine. So they've got everybody softened up nicely for this next rollout. And we've said, they've been looking at this for years, and they are using other, I think it was Visa or one of the credit card companies, MasterCard, was going to use a similar type of thing.
Notice the little subtle insertion of that as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with the lightning bolt on the second finger, which is the dominant finger of the hand. If you're into palmistry, that hand represents Jupiter. So it's supposed to be the king. Yeah, it's in the solar system of palmistry, that middle finger is the dominant finger of the hand. Yeah. So more little bits of esoterica connected into this, magic and occultism. Why the lightning symbol on that finger while he's doing that hand symbol? I could say stuff about why the ring on the thumb as well. If you look into palmistry, there's significance for things like that as well. But this is all part and parcel of that. Why have I been using that silly phrase, just a joke phrase of good morning global gulag? And the way I say it is deliberately meant to make the phonetics a little bit ambiguous, so it sounds a little bit like I'm saying God moaning global gulag, so it's sort of like, even God would be sighing at some of the shit that we're doing to ourselves with this crap. Whether you believe in God or not, up to you. But that's that global gulag that I've been talking about for years now, that I've tried to describe in different ways. But I think maybe it's just me, maybe it was just the way I could see the connections forming as the years went by and the different agendas started to knit together. I could see the progression of how all these things would be woven together to create this virtualized panopticon, this open prison society where if you don't, if you don't submit completely, if you don't bend the knee completely to whatever the official narrative is, just like 1984, even if the official narrative is 2 + 2 = 5, if you don't bend the knee to that, then you will be excommunicado, you will be excluded, your ID will be turned off. You will not be able to buy food. You will not be able to go into public spaces. You'll probably not even be able to leave your home because the door lock on your home won't let you out, because the door lock will be electronically controlled thanks to 10G smart homes.
I saw that today off Please Stop the Ride, yeah.
Shout out, please stop the ride.
10G homes, what a scary thing,
And just as a side note, they're calling it 10G, but it's not a similar sort of G progression. The terminology is being a bit mangled, they're using 5 and 6G frequency technology, but what they're offering in that smart home presentation is a smart home environment where you can get 10 gig download per second. So that's why they're calling it 10G rather than this is a step up of frequency 10G kind of thing.
I did read the comments on that, and it was good on that video.
It's still a crazy, maybe people have heard about things like sonic bath, sound bath, and the effects that can have on you physiologically and mentally. It can affect your thinking. They're already well aware of how sound and frequencies can affect people, both biologically and psychologically. And what they're offering people is a smart home where you'd never really need to leave the home because everything you need is there. You can work from home. You can order things in thanks to Amazon Palm. You just wave at the camera and they'll send you your food ration. All that environment is like you're being put into a contained experiment where they're bombarding you with all these frequencies 24/7.
It works seamlessly with the smart lockdown.
Yeah, it would, right? Yeah. They go, in so-and-so neighborhood, there's a new outbreak of a variant of concern. So click, we press the button, you're all locked in.
Yep.
You're not allowed out. And if you happen to die in your home, we can have the robotic drone systems come in and clear up your body and sanitize the home. Oh, how convenient. So on that kind of point and connection, I've got to mention this as well, because I couldn't not mention it, I'm afraid. I'm sure people will probably be fed up with this kind of stuff, but I had to point this out that, like I say, I've been ranting about this kind of idea, these things that they've been up to for a long time, for years now. And I was trying to point out the fact that they are creating a digital gulag. And then I saw this come up yesterday. It's 15th today, March 14th, from James Corbett. Digital gulag. And then you see, he does make reference to Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago, As many people have suggested, go and read it if you've got no concept of just how, what's a good word for it? What's a good adjective for it? Pernicious. That's a good one. Just how pernicious a state can be when it is exerting its tyrannical will over its populace. Right, if you're naive enough to think that, they wouldn't beat me round the head with their batons. Oh no, they wouldn't bend my arm up behind my back and probably dislocate my shoulder. Oh, they wouldn't do that. No. Go and read that and realise that that's part of how they operate. They rely on people being stuck in a naive expectation that violence and oppression won't be used against them, because that kind of thing doesn't happen here. It can happen. That's the point. It's not guaranteed that it will, but it can. So when you begin to see it happening, you shouldn't just try and remain in a denial bubble of, I love my Matrix steak. I'd rather be ignorant and not look at this stuff. No, you've got to look it in the face and see it for what it is. And this is all basically what James is saying in this article. But I thought it was also interesting that a lot of what he's included in this is pretty much the rhetoric that I've been using for the past several years now to try and explain this point to people. I'll just read this one out. Maybe I'll read these 2 paragraphs out. It strikes me that the digital prison that is being erected for us is quite similar to a gulag. That's what he's saying. Just out of reach in that nebulous cyberspace, here and not here, seen and not seen, just out of reach. In other words, it's like a phantom, it's amorphous. You can't pin it down and hold it to culpability or make it responsible for what it's doing or claim any kind of justice from it. You can never grab hold of it. It's a cloud. Sorry, back to the quote. We know that it exists, that more and more of our life is taking place there, but we are led into it so innocuously that it seems ridiculous to question it. Oh, James, it's just an account to send some mail. What's the big deal? And in his narrative, in his article, he explains that this sort of struck him when he tried to send postage mail through the Japanese postal system. And he basically got refused unless he had a online ID connected to a smart device and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, back to the quote. The big deal, of course, is that this is just one more brick in one more edifice, in one more institution in the amazing country of digital gulag. Sure, by itself, the creation of an account on the post office website is hardly the end of the world. But as you no doubt know by now, it does not end there. Soon enough, we'll find that our vaccination certificates are being tied to our digital identity, so that we can scan the proper barcode at the UBI office in order to receive our protein substitute rations. And you will scan it by waving your hand at it. In other words, you don't even need to carry an ID. Your very biology will be your ID. So therefore, there's no longer the risk of the system being unable to control you because you don't have a smart device and you refuse to make an account in that digital panopticon system. Doesn't matter, because just your very biology will be automatically attributed to you as your ID. It is a gulag, and the reason I've referred to it as well as a gulag is because data is the new gold. So the amount of clicking that you do online, the amount of interactions that you make online, the amount of connections, the amount of shares of links, of articles, of videos, of pictures of cats, all of that is creating data which is given a value by the system in the same way that we used to value collecting firewood and selling it to each other because we needed to cook our food. That is the equivalent of the work gang environment in a gulag. You are required to do labor. In the gulags, it was physical labor, breaking rocks, moving shit around, whatever it was they could use those people as slave labor for. In this environment, it's the same kind of slave labor bullshit, but you're moving digits around in a virtual world. You are garnering and exchanging and selling energy based on people's attention. How much do you retain somebody's attention? That is worth a certain amount to all these companies that value that data as if it's gold. This can sound somewhat self-defeating in my use of this technology to present these ideas, and that is a very true and valid point that we have to be aware of. My attitude for years has been make use of this while we can in whatever ways we can to get this information and these ideas out to people, but do so with the awareness that everything you're doing online, doing this kind of stuff, is adding data into their system. They want to know. They want to know what we're talking about. They want to know what we think of all these policies that they're trying to introduce, because that affects how they word the next policy. That affects how they construct the cage of the gulag. And it's a gulag because we're required to click. We're required to create an account on whatever platform. We're required to submit our biometric data so that the government can issue us with a virtual ID system. That is a gulag.
10 years ago, said this.
Yeah.
Or you even did a show recently, about 2 years ago now, called I think it was the Virtual Gulag.
Yeah.
That was the title of it. And
I'm glad that he's had, well, obviously for him, the way he talked about it, because another shout out for the Last American Vagabond, I caught his video of interviewing James, was it yesterday? Yeah, it must have been yesterday, because that's when he put the article out. But it was late at night, so I was just listening in and whatever, But the way he describes it, he's like, this was almost like a visceral slap in the face for him of bringing the idea home to reality. It's no longer just a theoretical idea that maybe you could say like nerds like me that have been interested in this kind of merger of what used to be called science fiction and now science reality, technocracy. That's been the kind of stuff I've been talking about now for donkey's years. But for him, the way he describes it, is sort of like his experience of going in that post office and expecting to be able to just, do what you do. Here's my parcel, send it off, please. And being told that, oh no, you've got to have this electronic identification. And only if you do that, that gives you the label that allows you to then post off. So no, you're not allowed, sir. Goodbye.
Computer says no.
Yeah. That is the computer says no experience.
Yeah.
So now he's got real gnosis of that effect of the enclosure. It's a virtualized enclosure, but it is having literal physical effects in our world. This is them enclosing the net around you of, well, you think you're going to be able to communicate with other people by post, do you? When you realize that your communications are being messed with on the digital realm, you're going to resort to snail mail, aren't you? Old style. Well, we can interfere with that as well by demanding that you have a virtual ID before you're even allowed to post anything. That's stopped you communicating, hasn't it? Yeah.
Well, pigeons. Maybe go back to
smoke signals.
Yeah.
I know that, it can sound very pessimistic, and I know James doesn't intend it that way, and the way he talks about it, and the coverage he's done over the years of this kind of concept, it shouldn't be pessimistic at all. It should be completely the opposite. The revealing of the reality helps you see it for what it is. Once you can see it for what it is, you can have a more confident plan of how to either deal with it, get rid of it, or steer around it, to evade it, to let it die out under its own weight. But not being aware of it means like a coral reef under the surface of the water. You keep hitting that and messing your ship up. So you need to know it's there so you can steer around it and avoid it if you can.
Making
in
it harder and
whatever way
harder,
you
though.
can.
I mean, we said like years ago, the way that it was going, like that you needed an email, electronic identity to do things, and it was getting more and more in every way of life. Everything you're dealing with things, and everything, you needed this digital connection, even at the job center now, isn't it? You need to have a,
you have to have a digital ID.
And this is how it's got over the years, and now we're, remember the apps, the rise of the apps and all that, what about all of it back then, when all these things were, being sort of just exploded onto the scene, really, didn't they? All this type of technology with this phone technology, just suddenly within a year or so, it just went from, being sort of like expensive stuff, they just rolled it out like they do. They just, people just lapped it up, the Samsung explosion of phones and everything all over the planet, billions of these bloody devices just getting rolled out to people, free of charge, or just pay £5 a month or whatever it is. And then you've got the internet in your hand, and look how people were reacting to it. Years ago, it was a few years ago, I remember probably 2013, now 14, where they were commenting on how many people were just literally just obsessed with themselves taking selfies. You remember that? All the selfie shit back then, all the growth of the narcissistic stuff. And there was images coming out of, baseball games in America where there's a group of girls just not watching the game at all, just busy taking pictures of themselves and interacting with their social media. And that was where it was, that's how it's gone. So people have
smart devices for dumb people.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't seen the latest technology that's coming. It's a tiny little yellow star you can put on your on your coat, so you can clearly see from a distance who is who. It's very useful.
So
it's terrible what's happening. It's really and the normalizing of this is this new normal shit. Yeah. It's hard to say anything about it because it's like Cookie said, we have been talking about this for a fucking decade now.
Yeah.
Right.
But now people are having literal experience of it actually affecting their life, because classically that I found that was part of the problem of trying to explain this stuff to people, is that because a lot of it was still conceptual, because it was only in there like think tank documents and policy documents like Agenda 2030, that's been in the background for decades basically in one form or another, but a lot of what it contains hasn't been implemented until this last decade. So when I was telling people about this stuff over a decade ago, they'd be like, man, I'm not seeing that, I've no experience of that, it can't be real.
We're not Germans.
You're just talking about theories and ideas, mate, it's not real. Whereas now people are having literal experience, gnosis of that kind of computer says no environment. Oh, can I open my shop today so I can earn a living so I can feed my kids? No. Computer says COVID, so you're not allowed to carry on existing basically.
Stay apart at all times.
I'm glad you mentioned about that kind of unaware rise of tyranny, because I wanted to mention a couple of other things, sort of like housekeeping, but I need to share some pictures. This is just something that I thought, considering I haven't mentioned this for a good while, maybe I ought to point this out, because there was a few comments on recent broadcasts that they weren't very clear what exactly they meant, and they were asking questions about elephants in the room and stuff like that. And I asked them, well, what elephant are you referring to? If you don't say which elephant, there's probably several elephants in the room that we could mention, but, which one are you referring to? But part of that consideration was the image that I've commonly used as a thumbnail for a couple of years now. If I share this one first, because this is the one that I've been using most recently. So obviously this is the one that pretty much most people see when the notifications for the show come out, or it's in the timeline or whatever. When I'm scheduling the broadcast, the setup for the broadcast doesn't allow me to fit the whole image in. There should be these text bits on the image as well, but I can only ever fit the smaller version in. But this is a version that was created for me from Tony. Big Tony made this for me, because when all this COVID bullshit started last year, I mentioned the concept of, it'd be good if we had a version of this picture where everybody was wearing a mask. And I said it'd be even better if the masks were all Ebola green. Remember the Ebola shit, the Ebola green? So that was where this particular image comes from. And then the original version of it is the Second World War propaganda image. It was a propaganda image for the Communist Party, basically, as far as I know. Anyway, I'm not that knowledgeable of the details of the background of this, but I think I know enough just to explain what I'm trying to say. The guy who's the sort of like main focus of the image, that at some point somebody's put the circle around it to make it more obvious, so you're not doing like a Where's Waldo picture search. But the guy who's got his arms folded, who's making the point, physically, visually making the point that he's not doing the same as everybody else in the image. His name is August Landmesser, and he was a Communist Party activist during the rise of the National Socialists in Germany. So I knew full well when this image was shared to me, somebody used to call themselves Red Eye Jedi, and he was a great bloke. He was into a lot of this kind of content that we were covering, these concepts that we were talking about, but he had other commitments in his life, so he had to walk away from a lot of this online kind of stuff that we do, because it absorbs a lot of time. Anyway, he shared this image to me because he thought I'd probably appreciate what it was saying, the subtle messaging in this image. And I was like, yes, thanks, mate, that's spot on, I'll make use of that. And it's become a stock image that I refer to try and explain certain concepts to people. So maybe one of those misconceptions, which I was very aware of when I first chose to start using this image, was that people will think it's about communism versus National Socialism, because the image is taken from that timeline during the rise of the National Socialists in Germany and the sort of aggression versus the communists and the Communist Party and the invasion of the Russians and all that kind of stuff. It's not really. I know there's that connotation there, and that's part of my thinking to me, it makes a good example to help me talk about certain concepts for people, or to help me sort of spark that thought process in people about these kind of questions. Yes, there are those connotations that this, all the uniforms you see, there are a few of them in the crowd. The uniforms are German army uniforms or Waffen uniforms, they're National Socialist Nazi Party, as people would usually refer to them. And this guy, if you look into the history of the image, you find out, he's a Communist Party member, etc. But that's just the connotations of the fact that image was taken at that time. And at that time, the narrative was about the Nazis versus the communists, and Hitler using the threat of communism to give rise to the power of the National Socialist Party, which becomes the Nazis, etc., etc. But to me, the main point that this image gets across is the concept of groupthink, group conformity, herd mentality, and individualism. And it doesn't say one is right and one is wrong. There's no explicit positioning or bias on one side or the other within the image. The image just makes a visual demonstration of, look, here's an individual, one person, one guy, one being doing something completely the opposite to all the others. All the others are doing this gesture that was a deliberate symbolic gesture to represent their adherence, their bending of the knee to a politicized agenda and ideology and all the other connotations that come into that tyranny that the Nazis became. They may not have started out with that intention, but that alone is debatable. But even so, there is no other subtle manipulation that I'm trying to do with this image. To me, the image is about helping people comprehend that just because the media is telling you that you should all be clapping for the NHS, and now, thanks to Billy Bob telling us that we're supposed to wear masks in the same way as we wear pants every day, also, does that mean it's okay for me to go out in public with my pants on my head? That's what Billy Bob just told me. That's what they're telling me in the media day after day, is that I should conform and do the same as everybody else. But if you have the ability to think for yourself, maybe you can see through all that uniform, that propaganda, that manipulation, the psychological control methods that they're trying to use against you. To me, this was a way of visually making a point to people of, look, you can say what you want about me and my opinions and my ideas and whatever, that's your choice, but this is about exactly that. Your ability to be an individual and disagree with what else is being presented to you, because most of what the media does, the majority of what the media does, certainly what's referred to as the mainstream media, is it's all about propagandizing you. It's all about selling you a story that perpetuates the status quo of those who are already in power staying in power. So from my part, there's no other intention of trying to deceive people. I'm not trying to say I'm a neo-Nazi or national socialist or a white nationalist or any of that kind of shit. This is nothing to do with that. This is to do with the individual and the collective, because that is a major part of what all these agendas for the past few decades have been about. 100 years, really, 100 years plus. This is about them. Yeah, yes, mate. Conformity to the concept of the collective, the hive mind. Yeah? Communism and National Socialism, in their extreme elements of their ideology, are the same as each other. When you go left or right on that political spectrum, you keep going far enough, eventually you meet in the same point. It's actually a circle. Yeah, they both use tyranny to exert their ideology on the populace. Fascism is just better at disguising it as public-private partnerships and freedom of choice within a limited selection that we offer you. But it's still the same tyrannical system, the same tyrannical methodology that the communists use.
Well, they offer you the left or the right, or you do nothing. Yeah. You just have your own choice and take a step back and look at it properly, and don't, have your own thinking about everything. And that guy represents that, doesn't he? So, and don't feel obliged like you do. Like we mentioned, that woman talking with the megaphone at the protest on Saturday, or the vigil, whatever it was, doing the same techniques with getting people to repeat things. And you just think for yourself. It's important. It's we've said this all along. We've been doing these sorts of chats and talks and all sorts over the years. That's my main thing. Think for yourselves, and it's very important. Don't get swept along with this Pied Piper shit. We've seen that more and more recently. You mentioned the Pied Piper a few weeks ago.
The Q.
The Q, and that's disappeared. Oh, no one talks about that anymore. Oh, don't talk about that subject. Oh, no. You see what I mean? How they play these games. Yeah, how they play these games with us. And suck you in.
In a similar fashion with this. Yeah, I didn't choose this image because it's the Nazi Party and the Jews. Because you could use this, if you could find them, you could use a similar image from Cambodia. The piles of skulls, the killing fields, where people were piled up and executed en masse. But I knew this is an image that, one, would elicit people's memories, because we all get so indoctrinated with the Holocaust narrative, and also because of the actual phrase over the gates. Yeah. To me, this just made very logical sense to explain the point about how they're setting up an infrastructure that is global, so there is in effect no actual physical fence. The fence is virtual and can be applied anywhere and where required. Like James was describing in his article, it's that amorphous cloud. You cannot pin it down so that you can address it and try and deal with it. But that gate in that barrier Once you go in, you need your vaccine to be able to go in. But once you're in there, you are acquiescing, you are bending the knee to that requirement that the concept of freedom is conditional on you following the diktats of that tyrannical regime. You want to be free, you've got to have the passport. You want to be free, you've got to have the vaccine, etc., etc., etc. That's the entrance into the digital gulag.
Into freedom. Sorry. Yeah.
You will have a slave bracelet and be happy.
Yep. But you won't own that slave bracelet.
No.
Wear it.
You'll rent it.
You've got to pay for it.
We don't want you getting any uppity ideas about property.
Oh, sorry.
But I wanted to address these points because it's something I haven't mentioned for a while. It's like, why do I use that image and what's it supposed to mean and whatever. So, hopefully that sort of gets the point across for people. If you're new to the channel, and maybe, because that thumbnail comes up constantly week after week, maybe you thought I was trying to make some kind of point about National Socialism or something. No, it's just yet another version of the same kind of Hegelian left-right bullshit rhetoric game that they play. You got to pick one side or the other and fight each other. That's not the reality. It's not the way reality works.
And someone in the chat there's mentioned freedom is not digital.
Yeah. It can't be. Literally, it can't be, because
people think that's what it is. It's I know they fuck people's heads up so much with this, haven't they?
Something that exists in the digital realm is not free, not in the true concept of the word. Freedom implies we can go about and do what we want as long as we're not harming others. That's the only consideration. But other than that, we're free to go about and do what we want and go where we want.
You're free to buy whatever you want within the environment.
Yeah. You're free. You're free to jump off a cliff if you choose to. I mentioned this before we came on air, because sometimes it does feel like part of that insanity is like you stood at the edge of a cliff watching people just walk to the edge of the cliff and jump off. And you're saying to them, don't do it. You're going to be severely hurt or die. Please don't go that way. Don't, look, there's loads of other directions you could go. And they just, as they're walking past you, they just go, oh, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. And then they walk off the cliff.
If they're recommending 3 of these things a year, 3 of these shots a year, then that's in 5 years. That's 15 shots. See how people are.
At least 2 in that Israeli reference that I was talking about last week.
5 years, 15 hits of that shit into your system over a period of, maybe people start noticing things as they get the seconds, and then next year the next lot they roll out. It's ongoing. People haven't even considered that. The people I know about it have not I've said, we keep going now. It's my arm hurts. It's like, get used to that. It's an intramuscular injection, man. It's gonna hurt.
Well, I'll mention this story as well while we're at it, because I did keep the page open. And this was,
I think the vaccine is a breeding program, just like with dogs. It's like they're creating certain kinds of humans.
Pug people.
We got a poodle human, and
could we get Hancock changed to Hancock-a-poodle? Or cock-a-doodle? Hancock-a-doodle.
Yeah.
But, this is one example of a story, a headline maybe even, not quite exactly the same wording, but very similar headlines that you can find from various places, not just from the UK, but from other countries. These stories are being reported again and again and again over the last few weeks now. This is in the Greenock Telegraph. Relatives of patients who died in Greenock coronavirus outbreak slam vaccination decision. And this is, it's only just a quick report. It's not exactly an article. Available to subscribers only. So this is just getting the sort of top paragraph. COVID vaccinations at a Greenock dementia hospital were only carried out 2 days before a deadly coronavirus outbreak, leaving elderly patients with no time to build up immunity, relatives say. Yeah, see the little spin there of how, I'm not saying it was the vaccine's fault. We're just saying that it wasn't quick enough. They didn't get it soon enough so they could build up immunity.
How many was
Exactly
it?
the same thing happened here in the Netherlands, and I know of Denmark, stuff like that happened.
But if you add up all the numbers, it's shocking. I mean, this is how many died here? 35 was it or something?
4.
Oh, only 4.
There was 35 over here.
Yeah, there was. That's sorry, I'm mixing the two up. Yeah, but if you take all the
On
numbers,
70. So
Yeah.
they had 70 elderly and 35 of them died.
That's half.
Fucking
That's
half of
50%.
them.
Yeah. I wonder as well with this, the fact that they're saying it's a dementia hospital, and considering what we've seen from other situations in other places or other hospitals, if they're dementia, they may not necessarily be given any choice, because they could be considered a ward, which means they'll be, listed as not capable of giving legal consent. So they may have been given vaccinations without their informed consent.
yeah, and how much has that gone on? I mean, we mentioned the figures from Amnesty International a few weeks back, just covering March to June last year. I think it was at 28,000 or something. It was I can't remember the exact figure, but that's just that little snip, of months of data they've managed to get. And then if you spread that out for the rest of the year and ongoing now, with the rollout of the jabby jab, then they don't want you to know these figures anyway. They don't even release the suicide figures. They've fudged the figures for everything all the way through this. As we said right at the start, none of it made any sense. None of it adds up. So
I did hear reports that they had released, or somebody had reported, the suicide numbers, but I can't remember where it was from. I know it was somewhere in the USA. And it was sort of not exactly a whistleblower, but it was somebody on the inside putting the information out through channels that they knew it'd get out there, without actually being like a whistleblower coming out and talking about stuff. But they reckon there was something like 1,700 suicides compared to 1,500 hospitalizations. So the number of suicides was above the COVID bullshit hospitalization numbers. And I think that's the main reason why they're not showing the suicide numbers anymore. They don't want people to realize that the so-called cure is worse than the alleged illness. And that point has been raised multiple times by different people over the last year,
Yeah.
For the last year, everybody who died of a side effect or a main illness or whatever, it was COVID.
Yeah.
COVID, because of the fake PCR test.
Died in a motorcycle accident, but died of COVID.
COVID, parachute, COVID. Yeah. So those numbers, you cannot take them serious at all. It's the test is flawed, the testing is flawed, so.
It's a non-starter,
what's happening now
isn't
with AstraZeneca stuff?
I'm glad you remembered to mention that. Right?
It is. It shows that they don't know. They really don't know truly what's gonna happen.
You are the trial.
Yeah.
12 nations so far. The list has gone up to 12 nations have stopped using the AstraZeneca because of the connection to what they're calling blood clots. Yeah, but as you were saying before we came on air, Lowlands was, talking about the idea that, well, they're calling it blood clots, but that could include lots of other things. So is this all just part of another cover story so that people don't ask too many questions about, well, what is actually the reactions that people are dying from?
Well, they're even suggesting now you can mix and match these.
Yeah.
They're saying, it doesn't matter. If you didn't get the Pfizer one, you can try the other one, the Moderna or the Oxford one. Or
what they are suggesting
whatever.
also now is just you take the shot and they'll sell you anti-blood clot medicine.
And a pizza.
So it's a
and a beer.
win-win. Yeah.
Warfarin, I think, was the name of one.
Yeah, that's a blood thinner. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one they gave me however many years ago it was now, when they claimed I had a blood clot. I was blood clot, man. But they jabbed me with that warfarin stuff. If they mix that in with the medical treatment, because it's not strictly speaking a vaccine, it's a genetic. Well, at least 2 of them are. It's a genetic experimental medical treatment. But just get your shot, folks.
Trial, guinea pig, any of that. It's just
You want to be able to have your juicy matrix steak, don't you? Yeah, and you got to get your jab in your arm. Can't be selfish.
what can I say? It's just madness.
It's like I said before. It's a crack in the shell. So they're the whole story that they're selling, that they're trying to save the world, is not really flying. It's cracking up. It's falling apart.
Yeah.
People aren't buying it. The whole lockdown. Texas, all those states that have opened up and no cases have gone up or all that stuff. So you can see the narrative is kind of falling apart. So that they're pushing for the next one, and that's the whole ID stuff, the vaccination pass. So even if you don't like it, if you want to travel, you'll still have to take the vax. It's not even about Corona. It's about being able to go on a holiday.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
If you've got any money,
or going in a shop, or
I think this year is going to be, because obviously we ain't over yet, and it's only really kicking into gear now. This year will be the crunch point. Because if people still insist in following along with the narrative because they're worried about an illness, then pretty much job done in terms of most of the population if they go along with it. But this year is going to bring more of those obvious truths to the forefront, and like James Corbett's experience, there's going to be more and more people. It's been happening all through this year. More and more people are going to have a direct personal experience of this new digital Big Brother police state panopticon system pushing them back or pushing them down or blocking them in some fashion. And that personal experience creates gnosis, and that gnosis will help people break through their own denial barrier and see that, like what Solzhenitsyn was describing, so many people are quite happily in that sort of that fog of convenience, of feeling comforted and contented enough with their society and their nation that they think, they'd never do anything like that to us. Given the chance, given the right situation, yes they will, yes they would,
and
yes
they're doing it.
Yeah.
Corona is the nightmare, and we are going to wake up in a totalitarian state.
Yes. Yeah. It's been used as that excuse to create that, to give it that justification of why they're going to introduce these things and why you have to accept them.
Yeah,
Why,
fear is such a basic feeling, and it's all about the fear. The classic problem, reaction, solution, but all spun around fear. And not fear about you, no. You have to protect the others. You have to make sure that my grandma died 10 years ago, but I have to protect somebody's granny and that shit, right?
Yeah.
But, meanwhile, they're seriously rolling out. Look at Israel. I mean, the Jews are now living in a concentration camp.
Yep.
They've been fooled in it again, right? They woke up in a fucking totalitarian.
Yeah. Yep. They did.
And it's one it's going to be worse than the one they experienced in prior generations.
Yeah, all of it based on fear, because they were so scared about the COVID that they were willing to give up fucking whatever they were fighting for over there in Israel. They gave it up. It's gone. and it's not gonna go back like that. Not in Israel, for sure not.
Yeah, and they're bashing up the Orthodox Jews as well, aren't they? Who some of them speaking out and having clashes with.
They are already planning to move to Iran because it's more free in Iran for them. Just saying, it's crazy.
But they are bringing it in a way where it's being forced upon their people, including those like the different denominations, the different. I was trying to think, like the Hasidic Jews, etc. Yeah, those that have a strong religious objection to it, or that kind of reasoning. It is now being forced upon them, and they are putting themselves into a digital police state environment. It's something I was trying to sort of point at last week with that virtual invisibility idea. We're going to see demographics of people like that disappearing off the internet connections. They're not going to be reported on. They're not going to be known about what's happening to them. In a very similar way to how over the years, and I've mentioned this certainly many times over the years, a lot of people think that everyone in Israel is all on board with the kind of Bibi Netanyahu attitude and agenda, and the reality is no, there's a lot of people there that disagree with that kind of Zionist thinking, and there's Jewish people that protest against that Zionist dominance and monopoly and policy and all that kind of shit that's been happening for decades now. But they don't get reported on in the news in general. So most people aren't even aware that they existed. I didn't know they existed until about the mid-noughties. And there was more online media that was doing that kind of coverage to show that, like, look, there's people in Israel protesting. They're not dumb. They can see what this government is doing to their own people as well as other people in other countries, etc.
Yeah, we can all see it, can't we? In each country, we all see it being, abused.
It's one of the reasons why I've never really agreed with people who claim that it's all one particular ethnic group that does all this stuff. The classic "it's all the Jews" kind of argument. It's like, yes, there's a lot of truth to some of those connections, but at the same time, there's a lot of untruth that's deliberately promoted just to parody it, to turn it into a joke, and to misdirect people from the actual reality of what's going on.
Someone just put in the chat the anti-Bibi, it's just disappeared. Oh, those anti-Bibi protests are largely led by Israeli intelligence agencies. Mink 109.
Yeah, probably similar to like we were saying earlier about the vigil for Sarah Everard. It would have been saturated with operatives and COINTELPRO and provocateurs and whatever else. That is unfortunate, the situation now. And even the image I showed from the Second World War, back then there would have been agent provocateurs and whatever.
Always. I mean, you go back to that Peterloo thing, which someone's talking about today. That interesting, that went on mainstream. I think it was on Channel 4 recently, which is one of the main channels here, and they showed it on there. So I think it's on their player. Those players they got, digital players. But interesting, just way back then, even the way in which that whole situation unfolded, where people were fed up and wanted to get fairer treatment, wages, whatever, living conditions. And what did they do? Watch the movie if you haven't seen it. I thought it was a good film.
I'll give a mention as well. I think I might have mentioned this last week or a couple of weeks ago or something. An old, it's not strictly speaking a Monty Python movie, but it's connected to some of them because it's got Michael Palin in it. But it's a Terry Gilliam movie. So if you're interested in that kind of cultural media and some of the interesting and convoluted connections to magic and esoterica and occultism and stuff like that, that's encoded into most of his stories that he puts into film. Gilliam, that is, Terry Gilliam. I've mentioned it. It's called Jabberwocky. And I've mentioned it a few times over the years because, like nearly all the other Monty Python movies, there are very fundamental philosophical truths that they include in their storylines. But obviously, of course, the whole things are done as comedy. They're meant to be comedy. They're satire and sarcasm and parody and stuff like that. You know, they're a social critique kind of thing. But at the same time, I feel that they were purposefully trying to get across certain philosophical ideas and truths to a general viewing audience. And Jabberwocky includes some subtle, fundamental stuff in the background. At one point, I dug it out and watched it again the other night. At one point, they've got the guild leaders, the like guild fathers, are basically like the corporate capital CEOs, you know, and they go through a consultation with the king because there's this threat of the monster killing people out in the villages. You know, the Jabberwocky is this monster that's going around eating people. And the guild leaders go to meet with the king. The king's saying, like, oh, you know, there's this terrible monster going around the land. We need to deal with this monster. We need to get it killed. We'll have to, you know, find a champion to go out and kill it. And all the guild masters are like, oh, no, we don't want you to kill it. Business is through the roof at the moment because everybody's terrified of the monster. Yeah. And then at the end of the sort of seated line of guild masters, he's the Vatican's representative, you know, the father, cardinal, or whatever he is. Yeah, and he's the same. He's like, oh no, we don't want to get rid of the monster. The attendance at church has been up. You know, the numbers have been rising every week because people are afraid of the monster. And that's what I mean about that kind of fundamental, subtle point of a truth that they're getting across to the public. The system needs you to have a monster to be afraid of, because the fear is what justifies them being in power or being in a position to take care of you. I know it sounds like it's a simplistic cliche that's been pointed out many times over the years, but it is absolutely what they've been doing for the last year plus. They've been selling this fear, this phantom menace, this Jabberwocky, that is the COVID, the deadly illness, the virus. You know, if anyone coughs within 10 feet of you, you're going to explode. You know, this, just the fact that you are afraid, that's all they care about, is making you afraid, because then you'll agree to and you'll accept all this shit that they implement.
And it works every time.
Dealing with an actual illness, actually, you know, there is a genuine pathogen out there that's causing a pandemic. You know, there's people dying in the streets, etc. Dealing with an illness is no longer of any meaning whatsoever. Now we've had a year of this bullshit, this propaganda play out. This is the reason I wanted to make this point. Yeah, that we had a year of this now. I think a lot more people, certainly the majority of people, are starting to realise that this is not about health. This is not about protecting us from an illness. Yeah, and that's them starting to realise that the Jabberwocky is actually just a fictional thing. It's a fantasy, a phantasm.
Yeah, a false flag.
yeah, just a long drawn out false flag.
But tell people they're being attacked, like that quote from the German guy. I can't remember. He used to, was it Goering or Himmler or one of them? Goering, I think it was, saying about just tell people you're being attacked.
Yep.
Go on, Pete. Sorry.
No, it's a bit like 300 years ago when you had an ailment and they didn't know what it was. It must have been the devil or something. And you pray to God that the demon would leave its body, and now you pray to Fauci and you name him.
Yeah.
That the scientists will come and save you with the cure.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's copy paste. It's just different faces. But
this isn't a Hollywood movie, is it? Because it's like the.
But again, it's we've been here before, like so many times, right? And
that's the quote.
Again, we haven't learned shit. Yeah, some of us are aware and awake, but that we had the same people in the Second World War who were warning about the fucking Nazi rise, and everybody was conspiracy theorist, right?
Yeah.
So, and we're here again. So, and they know this, the elites know this. So, I feel like we have to get ready, prepare as woke people to live in a society where we have to wear bracelets and shit to get around, and
Like invasion
already
of the-
think about ways to get around those things, right? So we have to fucking be ready to fool the system that they're rolling out. We cannot look at the old systems that have been, because what they're rolling out is something totally different, and we can now see some of the things come to reality. But my God, when that 5G network is all around us, and you connect the dots, and it's gonna come. Trust me. We can sit here hoping, praying with our hopium, because we should not fool ourselves into thinking that this is not going to happen, right? And
It's I do agree. It's certainly got to play out.
Got to certainly play out, and
Whether they successfully achieve all the shit that they want to do, that's where I would question and dispute and
that's
debate.
why they set the bar so high. They always put the bar ridiculously high, so they'll settle with a middle road. And we will agree. Okay, well, maybe not a pass, but a chip on my ass is okay.
I've described it many times over the years as they ask for a mile so that you give an inch.
Pavlovian.
Yeah, gradualism. They know that this
Stick
thing,
and carrot.
it takes generations for a lot of the stuff that they want to implement. I mentioned earlier, 100 years plus. Some of these ideas have been gestating and formulating and being planned and worked upon for 100 years plus. So they're not expecting necessarily for everything they want to happen overnight or within the next year or two. They're quite happy if it's done in a generation's time. Just the fact that it gets done, that's what they're working on. Yeah. So yes, I agree. This thing has got to play itself out in whatever fashion it does. But the more power we can withdraw from it, the less far down that road they're going to achieve. They're going to keep asking for a mile, and some people are going to give them that inch. But the less people that do, the less their gradualism is going to work. They're not going to progress any further.
The Romans tried, the church tried, the Nazis tried, you name it, all of them tried. But
failed.
None of them had the capability of what we have now, and that is a bracelet around your, or a chip in your whatever.
Only for those who want it.
Every fucking individual is like, with the X-Men movie, is on a Cerebro fucking screen, and you can just log on. Oh, what's Cookie up to? Oh, he's having his shit. How much I'll be back 5 minutes later. I'll check later.
We'll come back to do an analysis.
That's where we're going, and so we can say, okay, well, freedom has always found its way out, right? Yeah. And they never really have suppressed us totally.
No.
But they are clamping down the roads of escape.
Trying
more
to.
And more. With law and just so-called justice, the police, you name it, all the systems that are around us to control us.
This is their never-ending chess
including
game.
Democracy.
Of trying to acquire power over everybody else, and everybody else trying to draw that power back again. That's why the last century has been a lot more about like the rise of unions, the welfare state, things like. I mean, this is prior to this century, but like you mentioned, Peterloo, that was stuff to do with the Corn Laws. Yeah, and that was about wartime taxes, basically. The state wanted the money off the people to keep perpetuating their war, and that meant the people were starving. So they tried to introduce these corn laws that were going to scrape the tax off everyday people. All this kind of shit. They're constantly, desperately trying to drag more power off all of us. And just that very fact should hopefully help you comprehend that well, that means the power's with us then. Because if they've gone through this millennia, multiple millennia of them constantly trying to take the power from us, draw the power from us, that means the power all resides with us. Not necessarily each and every individual, but the mass of individuals.
To them, it's a game. Like who's the bigger William the Conqueror, or you name it. Who will go down in history as the biggest tyrant, basically?
Bill Gates, probably.
That's his hope. That in 100 years there will be statues of Bill Gates, the guy that liberated us from all the plebs.
What he's made the most is when I wake up one day and see the reports of how Gatesland has just opened its doors to the public and it's populated. You ever seen that film, Being John Malkovich?
Yeah,
it's populated by just clones of Billy Bob. Because he's been buying all that land up in the USA and elsewhere. He's buying up enough land so he can literally feed an army. Why does he need to be able to feed an army? Is it because he's
Chinese army?
Yeah, he's busy growing his clones in his subterranean lair. And one day we're going to be invaded by all these Billy Bob Gate clones. I'm being deliberately silly, but the point is primarily these people like him. These people, those people over there, they're the bad people. But people like him are quite happily grabbing up all the power they can while all this shit is happening, because people are distracted by being in fear and they're so desperate for that fear to be alleviated.
I'm pretty sure they're already doing that in China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let me just read this quote. I mean, people have probably read it because it's been on screen for the last 5 minutes. So just in case people can't see the screen and they're only listening to the audio, this is a quote from Hermann Goering, Hitler's Reich Marshal. This is a quote from him at the Nuremberg trials. Naturally, the common people don't want war, but after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag people along, whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. This is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country. It works the same in every tyranny, in every regime. Sorry, that's me adding a bit on the end.
Yeah, that's it.
In every regime, they use the same methodology. The National Socialist Party at the time, because the German people are not dumb, and they're very skilled and knowledgeable at use and application of technology. To the German people who were in the army then, or in the Waffen or whatever, they were tasked with figure out the most effective ways to propagandize our own population so that we can achieve what we want to achieve. So they very quickly figured out, well, how do you do that to people en masse? We use these methodologies just like rulers and tyrannies have used in the past, and we present them in this kind of fashion to the public, and boom, job done, the public goes the direction we want.
9/11, anybody?
Yeah. Same old shit again and again and again.
Yeah.
And if you question it, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. And if you point out it actually happening to people around them, these debunkers, these people who want to refute what you're saying in some fashion, just point out the actual examples of it going on around them at the time, and I guarantee nearly to a man or woman, whoever it is you're talking to, they will resort to attacking you, the messenger. They will completely ignore the evidence and information of what's being done literally now, day after day, for a year now. They'll ignore that and they'll just say, oh, you would say that because you're a crazy conspiracy theorist.
And who's to say when the corona narrative breaks, there's not a phone call going to a Wuhan lab where they say, release the Kraken, and There's a serious, real fucking virus. You know, they could do that easily. You know, they used to do these kinds of games with wars, right? And the First World War was biological warfare, mostly or mainly. What won that war? And it's back now, but it's now called medical.
Just as a note of interest, who was it who sanctioned the use of chemical warfare in the First World War? Have a guess. Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
In a very similar fashion that he sanctioned Bomber Harris's plan to begin total war bombing of the German people. So when they talk about the Blitz spirit and all that crap and how the Germans were so nasty to us because they come over here and bombed our civilians, we fucking started it. I was saying we, yeah. It's just the genealogical connection of the fact that I live in the same geographical space as those people, yeah. But Churchill agreed to Bomber Harris's plan, and they went ahead with the firebombing of Dresden and the mass saturation bombing, carpet bombing techniques. Lo and behold, the Germans, like I just mentioned, they're good at technology and engineering. They watched what the British bombers did and they went, okay, yeah, we'll do the same. Carpet bomb civilian targets. But it's all just that chessboard game of, we'll kill some of your population, you kill some of our population, and we'll get rid of some of those useless eaters. Now they disguise it as, it's for your health. It's for your standard of living that we persuade you. I'm just looking at Billy Bob's image in the background there. Yeah? We persuade you that to have a better standard of living, you need to not have as many children as you used to have. Preferably have no children at all. Yeah, they've killed people before they've even been conceived. Is another. I know it's rhetoric, yeah, but that is what they're doing. Rather than having a physical, literal war with people killing each other, they just persuade you to not give birth to those people in the first place. It's eugenics wet dream or non-wet dream.
Well, I said that was the start, this whole thing. Eugenics in dream, yeah.
But that is a bit sort of, it's good for comedy reasons, but it is an oxymoron. Yeah? A eugenicist wet dream. Yeah? Right, okay, that's enough ranting and rambling. I hope that we've at least talked about some things that have kept you interested, maybe helped you learn something, or encouraged you at least to go out and learn something, learn more. Yeah.
Thanks, Cookie, and all in the chat as well.
Yes, thanks for everyone in the chat. I did my usual again. I sort of had a glance every now and then to read a few bits and bobs in the chat, but I didn't exactly come back to the chat. So one of the weeks maybe I'll do a broadcast where it's just interact with the chat and sort of try and catch up and compensate for hardly ever doing it along the way as we're doing these broadcasts. But yeah, thanks to everyone participating in the chat. Thanks to everyone tuning in for giving us your attention for a couple of hours or so, nearly a couple of hours. We will be back on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel, approximately the same time, about 8 p.m.
Yeah,
might be a minute or two over, but we're not usually too late. And Steve Tagoose will be on Thursday night with the mystery show. I haven't had the chance yet, to listen to the extra show you did on Saturday. I caught about 10 minutes of it, but I will watch it back. So yeah, check out Steve Tagoose's channel. He's doing more than just the Thursday night broadcasts now. So you'll have to have a look to see when he's doing another broadcast. I know the YouTube doesn't exactly work very well anymore in terms of notifications and stuff like that. But that's just, part and parcel of this new digital gulag. You have to, expend a little bit of energy to actually look to see, is that channel broadcasting? Did they put up a new video? Because the YouTube system is not going to tell you most of the time. They don't want us to keep communicating. So, yeah. that's enough. I'll shut up now. Thanks again, folks, and we'll speak to you again soon. Cat cheese.